I don't think that designers need to know how to code to be good designers, but I do think that designers need to know about code to be good designers. Designers should know what a tech stack is, and they should know what languages their designs are being built on, and like what is a component library, what makes a design expensive and not expensive to implement. I think that this like higher meta level of understanding engineering and basic engineering fundamentals is totally critical, just because you need to understand how your design is going to get out there in the world. One of the biggest challenges of designing a tool that's helping people design their own ideas is actually being able to reduce the amount of design that's happening.
Can the future of design be totally no code? Let's find out. This is Design-ERS, an irreverent podcast for unconventional makers.
We're online. Hello, happy morning.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
How are you guys doing?
Doing great. We are all over the world. Well, we're all over California, and you're in Lisbon?
I'm in Lisbon and couldn't be better. 22 degrees and excited to be here with you, Adrianne.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here too.
So today we are going to talk about a very specific and intriguing topic. I will start prefacing it by saying that for those of you that might be a little bit older, like me, well, not older, but more experienced, there was a time when we used to think that only a very limited set of people could design anything on the internet, even if it was just like a website. Those tools like the Dreamweaver or the front page of the time were very nascent tool, and only tech-savvy people could really use them. But today, with the many improvement that technology has done, there is the rise of this GUI, so GUI-based tool that are literally what you see is what you get editor that allow anyone to just go in and design any sort and shape of website. And the beauty of that is that this approach has been expanded to other tools. So basically, pretty much today, you can do anything by not needing to know the technicalities of a tool. Adrianne, in this sense, is one of the specialists that we found about it in what it's called the no-code era. And I love it because it's one of those missions when you say, hey, everyone is a maker, and you can empower everyone literally create what they want by just using this tool. Welcome, Adrianne Ngam. You have like 1 minute. Icebreaker.
Let's say 1 minute.
To introduce yourself.
To tell us. Go.
Okay, cool. My name is Adrianne Ngam. I'm a product designer in the Bay Area. I've been designing, I guess you could call them creative tools, designer tools, for the gist of my product design career. My background is in architecture, which is why I got interested, I think, in these types of tools. So things that have tons of complexity, lots of systems, those are the things that are very appealing to me. You probably wouldn't hire me as a designer to do like your sexy onboarding flow or a marketing website. Like that's not what I do. So like the low code, no code space is definitely where I feel like I've found my home as a designer, and I'm super excited to talk about it.
Let's cut the chase. Let's start with the provocative one, okay? We hear a lot of our listeners asking the same question, that is, should a designer know how to code? But at the very heart of what we're talking today is no code. So let's try together to give an answer to those listeners of us. Should a designer be able to code, or will this tool make code almost like useless?
I don't think that designers need to know how to code to be good designers, but I do think that designers need to know about code to be good designers. The key to what's gotten me where I am in my career, and I'm still young, I consider myself to be, just starting out, but I think designers need to know how to answer basic questions. Like, designers should know what a tech stack is, and they should know what languages their designs are being built on, and like what is a component library, what makes a design expensive and not expensive to implement. I think that this like higher meta level of understanding engineering and basic engineering fundamentals is totally critical, just because you need to understand how your design is going to get out there in the world. When it comes to actually writing lines of code and being able to recall syntax and like indentation and knowing what code editor to use, blah, like I'm not personally interested. I think a lot of people are, and those people should, do what you want to do. But to be a great designer, I feel like I'm never going to be able to write lines of code as beautifully and proficiently as people who've dedicated their careers to it. I think people, or designers specifically, who can benefit from knowing how to code are ones who want a lot of autonomy. So like I could see a lot of benefit in being a freelancer, executing very specific, bespoke types of websites for their clients, that it would be easier for somebody like that to know how to code. I think the average designer working for a medium or a larger team in Silicon Valley or, just in a typical tech company doesn't need that level of expertise in actually being able to execute code. I think they just need to know about it. It's really about empathizing with the engineer and understanding what it's going to take to turn something from a Figma file into a working thing that people are actually touching.
It was lovely. And I'm a product designer too, and I can totally feel what you said in terms of probably understand the limitations. Is that correct? Because you cannot be not aware of what are the responsibility and the capabilities that you have in the real world. Otherwise, we are just dreaming, right?
Yeah.
I tell you a story about that, behind that, because after a couple of months, we launched Designers, me and Federico. I had this kind of strange idea, let's say, because I'm not an engineer, to code a native app for iOS of our podcast. But then I discovered Glide and I said, look, this thing is amazing. So we created together, managed an app using Glide for our podcast. And the set of features in terms of links, images, and all the stuff inside would have required like 10 times the same amount of time to build natively in the same effort. Now, I don't want to incentivize anyone to stop coding because you can do this with drag and drop, but with the power of Glide and all the no-code tools, what are the next steps that you envision for this movement, let's say, to expand even further, to empower people to do more with less experience in technical fields?
That's such an interesting question. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot. Is there definitely seems to be a limitation in understanding what no code can do for you. If I'm just the average non-tech savvy type of person, I want to build something, and I feel like so many people can take it to a really nice high level of like functionality, but then there's this like extra step above that is like this expertise knowledge that I think is still kind of held by engineers about like, how do I get data to start working for itself? Like if this, then that, or cascading actions. If this thing happens, then this happens, which causes this, and this to happen. So like there's like this higher crust of functionality that I think, because the tools are just starting to get there now, right? Like, no code, low code has been around for a while, I guess, but when you look at it in like the slice of timeline of what technology has been available to creators, it's still relatively new. And I think people, it's hard to imagine what you can do with something until those tools even exist, right? Like people know right away how to create like a guide to my city, or like sign up for a time slot on my hair salon app. But like giving it a higher level of functionality, I think is the hard thing to educate and to inspire about. And I really think the making it easier in the UI is going to be one thing, but a lot of it is going to be time and really working closely with people who have embraced the more complex aspects of doing low code and no code, and being able to like celebrate it, learn from their process, and inspiring others to do it. And there's really been like this grassroots kind of like Twitter bubbling community of discovered how to do these things, and then that gains momentum. So like until I think those pioneers can get over that cliff and represent, hey, I did this. Look how complex I made it. Look how rich this is. And then having things grow from there.
If you think about it, like it's also the natural progression of how it should be, right? Because I believe that all those the apps like Glide and the one that were flourishing right now, a lot of them are also in the design space specifically, like Bubble, even Webflow, if you wish. But it's kind of the same story that we saw with even with all the cloud and all the movement to the cloud or everything that can be even on Salesforce. So it's just very basic use cases that then gets escalated and built in something that is more robust. Like, for example, Salesforce wasn't doing all the things that it does today, and it was just starting as a Salesforce tool, right? So I think it's amazing because right now there is attention even on the design tools, and I love that they do one thing right. So that's the thing I love about Glide, and it's not that they try to solve and boil the ocean. They're really focusing on one use case or a few use cases, and they're like, hey, this is what you can do with this tool, and you can do it right. And then, as you were saying, and you were suggesting, Adrian, then let's let the complexity come as the use case evolve. And if you need to attach, like, I don't know, something like a CMS or some database and everything else, you can make it like as complex as possible. But I love that it's literally quick and everyone can start literally with an Excel spreadsheet and an idea and even a template. It literally takes 10 minutes. And for those that haven't seen the app, literally that's what Glide is. You can create your own website/app by starting with a template and a few lines in a table.
Yeah, and I think that this idea of templates is very rich too. I mean, if you think about Squarespace and the way that they've, anybody can build a website now, right? Like when I was just starting out my career, to build a website was like, or to put your portfolio online felt like this huge hurdle. And you're like, oh, I'll never get a job if I can't, build this amazing responsive website. Sorry, my dog is like whining right in the background.
No worries.
She has so much to say about no code. But Squarespace is just a collection of templates that suit very basic functional needs. Like there's the e-commerce template, there's the portfolio website template, there's like catalogs. And then from there, you can do these little tweaks, and it sort of like maps down into how many different permutations you can get off of very specific functionalities at the top. And I think that is going to be like a very similar theme that you get out of most no-code tools, where you'll have like templates for people who have some sort of e-commerce focus or a dashboard analytics focus or a guidebook catalog type thing. But like once you hit those key functionalities, like you only really need the template, and then you can tweak them as you go. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. And I think like as no code expands, like those really big, larger ideas, like they're iterations of each other across companies, right? Like dashboard is a dashboard, but there are like little things that make them special, but you will start with like some sort of basic dashboard idea and grow off of there. So until we can get those templates and like understand from customers what people are building, what they need, I think that's going to always be the foundation of how things are going to grow.
And based on things to grow, now if you can just take a step back from your experience at Glide, what is the biggest challenge that you have tackled there?
Okay, I have the perfect answer for this. Well, not perfect, but I'm going to let my dog out really quick.
Go, no worries.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, one of the biggest challenges of designing a tool that's helping people design their own ideas is actually being able to reduce the amount of design that's happening. Part of our job as UX UI designers is owning what the best experience is going to be. And all of that is based off of, years of experience we have learning about the psychology of users, visual feedback, basic design principles, that's all based off of like very learned and honed expertise from lots of people in lots of different industries. And you don't want your typical user who owns a corner store and wants to manage their inventory to have to learn all the basic principles of design. That's, that's not really the goal of what they're trying to do when it comes to building their software. So the hard part of designing was, how do I make it so that my users don't need to worry about things looking great, feeling right, and having people use them correctly. All of that needs to be kind of packaged in to just a couple of choices or no choices at all, so that an experience is great by default. The expressiveness of how something is going to work shouldn't really be the worry of what the builder is doing. You shouldn't have to worry about how it looks and what the color theme is, and is the contrast going to be right? Is the accessibility going to be correct? Those are all things that we need to build into the product. So then the question becomes, where do you draw the line between how much is there by default and how much customization you can have? The customization is really more about functionality than it is look and feel. But at the same time, as you're courting more sophisticated customers, there's always this question of brand and trust, and my typeface represents my company and my watermark, our colors, so it's you have to do a lot of push and pull between what is the right amount of customization to give somebody versus what do you just say, no, this is going to jeopardize or lead to this leak where people can actually create a bad decision and make a bad design.
That's pretty fascinating. It's striking a balance.
Yeah.
It's how will empower?
Tricky.
Yeah, how can you empower people with different savviness, tech savviness, expectation, and yes, because you can get from the person that is doing their very first app to someone that has maybe a small business but might have a logo and a visual identity and all the other stuff, to someone that can be even fairly sophisticated but just love the idea that this is quick and dirty and can even run as a prototype. So can even be that. This is an insane difficult job to do.
Of course.
Yes.
A very typical layout, for example, I want to have a grid of images on my phone. It sounds very simple to the average user, but we're actually making tons and tons of decisions for them. What aspect ratios are going to look correct? What is the rounding of the corners? What's the relationship between the images? How is text going to fall between every little grid module? At what point does it truncate? All those tiny little micro design decisions that take up, a ton of our time in our everyday work are things that we don't want our users to worry about because it doesn't help them get to their final goal, right?
Now, I don't want to, I promise, I don't want to advertise for myself, but I found that there is a great opportunity to brainstorm on the onboarding thing of Glide. Or for example, for every kind of this no-code app environment, think about the question of what are you passionate about? How high are your expectations in terms of what kind of questions should we ask to empower immediately my new user that comes to the platform with saying I just want to build a podcast app for me and Federico, rather than this app is going to be live on the BBC or I don't know, Sky, so I need everything set it up. It's so, no, to frame up this no kind of question, it's so inspiring to think about empowering users and tackle this challenge of setting great expectations to them.
I found a good example, someone that did a good job that is probably in the same space, is also Wix that I've been using. Wix kind of use the same easy to run template, and actually our website for designer runs on Wix, because with Raffaele we said we went through the same process. Let's say that we are sort of a middle ground. We wanted something that looked good but was pretty quick to set up. So we start browsing and discussing between me and Raffaele. You can imagine everyone is a little bit more opinionated. Should we spend time doing Webflow, learning Webflow? And they were like, for what we need, it has to be effective, right? And looks decent and should allow us from some personalization as we want. So we found a nice template. And the funny part is that we didn't even end up using the podcast functionality of Wix, because we realized that we didn't need that. We just want something that could link to our YouTube, so it was more like a portfolio. And that's the beauty, and that's the difficulty of that. Because when you think podcast, you might think about, oh, I'm giving people a podcast template. Guess what? We're having a podcast and we're using a totally different, we're using an agency template with video, because our podcast is mostly seen on YouTube. So this is I think a good example of how something can be created that way. And the interesting part of Wix is also that now, probably around 1 year ago, they launched this advanced editor that I think is called Editor X. That is actually takes more time for user to understand how it works. And for someone that, of course, I haven't been using very complicated tool, so I'm not a pro in any Photoshop or any of those like tool like that. But having used Wix a lot, there is still like a learning curve to use Editor X. But I think it's a very interesting approach, because they're saying, hey, now that you evolved as a designer, or now that your needs are evolving, you can try this one that is more advanced. It can give you more freedom, but you already know what the platform is offering. So I think this is a great trade-off that I've seen in the market.
Yeah, and that progression you're talking about is important to consider too. If you walk into a website, I'm building my very first website. I'm not good at computers, or whatever whatever non-technical people are describing themselves as. If you open up the platform, build it, and it looks like something like Glide, like a couple of tools, a couple of buttons, templates you can switch it through. It's very comforting. Like, you can explore, you can try things, and things are sort of happening the way you expect. If I opened it up, Glide, never having built a website before, and it looks like something like Adobe After Effects, like, I'm gonna freak out. There's a million buttons and a million switches. But like, one of the tricky things is that to build really robust software or apps, like, people are going to evolve to the point where they want as much control as you can have in After Effects. And how can you accommodate that customer, but still have them begin at like the baby step level, where when you see the UI, you're not going to like cut and run because you're intimidated. That's a really hard thing to straddle, being able to satisfy the beginner and the power user.
And I think that this conversation is important because I don't know if you had the opportunity to look at it, but in one of our first episodes, we talked with Matteo Gobbi, who's as a senior iOS developer at Google, that started his own app called IPTV-X. And he was telling us about like an experience he had, a discussion he had with a colleague that was about, do we really need the UX UI designer, or will a software engineer be sufficient? And it's kind of the other half of the coin, right, from the conversation we're having today. And this actually, the reason why I mentioned that is that we realize now that between the people that live in this space, that everyone is needed. As you were saying, like, yes, a software engineer can give you the level of complexity and sophistication that can bring up and scale, because they know the way you can build something robust, something that can give you all the features that you want, and what are the implications to that. But on the other side, we both realize that you can create something really functional that does the job, but if people don't grasp it immediately and they don't know how to use it, then it's useless. So I love that out of all the people that we're talking to, we realized like, designers and engineers are not enemies. They're actually best buddies, because that's the way we work together. Everyone need each other.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And I would say, since we talked a lot about the no-code, right? All this new creativity, all this new space that it's going to redefine the design in a certain way, right? Mm-hmm. What is your definition of design nowadays for the future?
Design to me is always about systems, and it's also what makes design to me is also about building. So I'd say that a design is a built expression of a system, and the system is meant to achieve some sort of goal for somebody or something. But I think when I talk about design not as a verb but as a noun, it's always about like what is the thing that has been made, and that's why I think my opinion about understanding engineering is what it is. Like, we don't need to know how to write the code, but we need to understand how things are built. Because the goal of a designer should always be to create something that's going to have an end result. Otherwise, it's like, what you said, Federico, it's like a hope and a dream. It's just an idea. But the difference between an idea and design is building.
And doing is always better than talk, guys.
That's right.
I totally agree. And reiterating and do this stuff, it's great.
I have one more question. You mentioned that you did study architecture. That's your background. How did that help your approach to design and digital at the same time?
Sure. I mean, architecture is a very, very, very old profession. Like maybe it was the first job. Ancient Egyptians had architects, but it's so layered and complex, and so many different tools are needed to be an architect. Like you need to know how to draw, you need to know how to do math, you need to know how to render. So there's 3D modeling, there's material specifications. So there's like a ton of tools that tons of tools and software that a typical architect needs to do their job. And I just found like when I was practicing architecture, I was a little bit more interested in the process and the tools we were using than actual designing of buildings. Like I was always designing the workflow of how to optimize the way that we would get a 2D drawing into 3D and then produce the renderings and produce the drawing set. Like that was very fascinating to me. So I think a lot of what helped me from architecture, aside from the conceptual design thinking, which was invaluable, was just exposure to really complicated processes and systems, and having things that had a lot of contingencies on each other. It just led me to be like a very, I think a couple steps ahead in terms of like how things are going to fall out when it comes to digital tools, and like knowing how to stretch one tool to hit needs. That's what a career in architecture gave me for tech.
I think it's very interesting. And again, it kind of pairs with the map that we were trying about the modern designer. We did an exercise with Raffaele where we were trying to identify, okay, what are the new skills that a designer needs to have? And it's interesting because in our last episode, we discussed more about the data aspect and the business side that a designer must have. And I think you touched upon that, even related today, not only to the engineering and tech side of it, but also to the process and the strategic part of it. So what you're talking about, what architecture gave you is more this holistic kind of 360 degree of being able to see not only the creative part, but what needs to be done so that we can get the creative right. So again, it looks, the structure is very, very important as well. And again, everyone has his own preference. As you said, you started with those because you personally love those. So there is no right way in or way out of design. It's almost like it's a huge agglomerate of different roads, and you have your main one that drives you and the one you're passionate about. But there are so many that you can get interested of and know more about that gets the profession extremely fascinating. And then I guess that's the reason why we say that everyone can be a designer.
Especially if you work together with someone who has completely different backgrounds from you. So you get in touch with different perspectives and different minds. That is, totally agree. It's super fascinating.
Adrianne, I have one last question, if you're okay with that. Imagine we are in, that's 2020, let's say 2025. Let's not go too far. What do you think will the status of no code being, and how will normal people
be able to do, let's say, be able to do without effort or like normal? May I add this, Federico?
You got it.
What I would hope is the case is that when we think about no code tools and building apps, is that people won't just think about their phones. People will think about no code more in the realm of software than apps, and think about like how much are they using software. Every single little widget you open up on your computer, especially at work, like every dashboard, every portal, every digital process that has pixels behind it, is touching software in some way. And like I think when people think about no code and apps, they're like, oh, I'm going to build the next Instagram, the next Uber. But it's a lot bigger and richer than that, right? Like And thinking about that hasn't really been a priority for the average person. I think that's something that, engineers and UX UI designers think about a lot, but like there's really interesting things to me like Finder, Finder in Mac OS X. When I say I'm going to build an app, like you wouldn't really think about Finder specifically and the type of environment that it's living in now, right? And I hope that no code is going to expand the creativity of people outside just I'm going to create like an interactive app of my favorite types of dogs, or like my dog walking app. It's going to get much more robust than that. And I think it's going to stretch definitely outside of this little square. It's going to get bigger.
No code beyond the screens.
Yes.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much, Adrianne.
Thank you.
Hope to get in touch with you sooner than 2025.
Yeah.
We will see for the future.
But
put a reminder on my calendar. Thank you so much, guys.
And let's see
Enjoy
where
the rest of your day.
at.
Bye. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you so much.